What's going on, everybody? LK here. Today I want to talk about, should we buff or should we nerf? So a lot of people have been talking about balancing and like a lot of the games that came out this year. So like Street Fighter will be getting a patch, I believe, after Capcom Cup, but people have just been like complaining about like Luke or Ken or JP or DJ or whatever the character of the hour is in the discourse, right? So I just want to touch on some things about how I feel about this topic. Some people are like, we should only buff, and some people are like, why don't they just take this character down? And even myself, in the most recent Guilty Gear Strive tier list that I made, I was like, yo, Arxis, it's been like 2 years, you can start hitting some kneecaps. Like, it's not a mystery how good some of these characters are. That was kind of from the heart, you know what I'm saying? Kind of from the heart. So first I want to start by saying, honestly, again, the job of being a fighting game developer is tough, man, because no one is going to be satisfied no matter what. It's not that often that people have a version that they're really satisfied with, where everyone is kind of happy. So honestly, if you're a dev and you're watching this, I salute you. You have a very, very hard job. That being said, though, I do think this discussion, I mean, of course, social media in general is part of it, but I do think it's kind of driven by the fact that you can reliably count on a patch to come for a while when a game comes out. Depends on how long your game cycle is, of course. You know, games like Tekken and Street Fighter are out for years, like 6-7 years. Traditionally, NetherRealm games are pretty short cycles as mainstream games, maybe like no more than 2 years normally. So the danger of patching too much is that people will start using the patch as an out to solve their problems rather than figuring it out. It is important in like these 1v1 games that people learn how to figure stuff out. There are examples of characters going up because they got figured out and down because they got figured out. There are a lot of Shoto characters in the past that they started as top tier because they were very easy, but people figured them out over time. Sometimes they survive, like Soul. Sometimes they fall off, like Ragna. But then you also have the opposite of characters launching and people like, this character is absolute dog water, but they turn out to be ridiculous. The most recent example in my experience is definitely Happy Chaos. I do remember people saying he was very bad until people started figuring out the guard crush loops in season 1, and then all of a sudden he had all this neutral control, all this combo control, just a really out of control character. But I do sort of think we're past the point of annual patches. In the past, like especially when I was beginning, you might not see a new version in a couple of years, because even if a new version comes out, you have to wait for the console version. So if you're playing a game in like PS2 days especially, you're waiting for a disc, just straight up. As we got to PS3 and Xbox, eventually we were able to get the patches faster, and the gap between Japan getting a new version and the rest of the world getting a new version got smaller and smaller. I really like what GG is doing right now, of doing like one big patch a year and then a middle patch in between. Season 1 actually had quite a few patches. I want to say it had like 3 or 4, but that was on launch. I think devs are very careful to try to make the balance as good as they can when the game launches, because there are examples of games just immediately getting shot as soon as they release because people are like, this game is super broken. I mean, I am from one, right? I played BlazBlue CT. That game died really fast because people were like, New 13 is broken and easy. So the impression of your game really matters. And they're saying they're doing that with Season 3 as well. MK1 already did a patch a couple months after the game came out, but there were some really strong strategies found in that game, so I think that's perfectly understandable. I think one patch per year is a pretty good compromise that would make people pretty happy, right? That means one patch every 6 months, one meaningful patch once a year, but by having the middle patch be just like kind of a tuning patch and not a big patch, people will get to see the overall vision of what that year was kind of supposed to be like and what the ideas were with the big changes at the beginning of the year. That being said, though, we have to talk about buffs and nerfs. The common take is that you should just buff and not nerf. Just buffing all the characters to like the top level, while it'll make the game explosive, I think this will unintentionally consolidate the game, because there's always going to be better stuff, or the game's going to feel too volatile and random. Then people are going to be complaining about like, I feel like I just get hit randomly and lose. Especially if your game doesn't have like a combo breaker mechanic. I think just straight up buffing all the characters, especially if the characters were already at a decently highish power level already, it's pretty dangerous. This kind of deserves its own video, but games with combo breakers can buff characters more than games without combo breakers, because without a combo breaker like Burst or something, or Circuit Spark, anything like that, if you're in a game where the characters have a lot of super strong tools and you get hit and there's no way to get out of the combo, you're really screwed. Things like X Factor or sparking aside. So those are mechanics that heal you, power your characters up, etc. They're, to me, combo breaker adjacent. So if your game has nothing like X Factor or burst, then you really are playing a dangerous game by hyper buffing your characters. If your game does have a combo breaker, I feel like it's fair that the devs experiment and see how far they can go and see what happens to the game, most importantly when the game gets pushed kind of far. That's kind of how I feel about Guilty Gear Strive right now. Next, we talk about nerfs. So sometimes people are like, why don't they balance the games? Like, why don't they nerf this character or do that to that character? At least one answer is they've definitely tried to do that. I played several versions of fighting games in my career where I and the community in general thought these were pretty fair versions of the game. So we're talking about like MDAC B2, BlazBlue CS Extend, BlazBlue, Chrono Phantasma Extend, like those versions of games. And with super powerful strategies being weakened, these games do take more skill and the games are more balanced. However, the problem is the majority of the community now thinks that the game is too boring. That's the problem that devs run into. This is why if you're like, man, why do they keep letting this character cook? Because you despise the character, you want the character to be severely weakened, this is why they don't do it. If they lower the power level of the game too much, then people are going to complain about the game being boring or repetitive or there's no sauce. I'm sure you've heard these things before about various fighting games. It's a hard line to toe, but I think it's been done successfully where different games have found like their sweet spot of how powerful or how not powerful the game should be. There's also examples of final versions of games where devs are like, all right, we're not going to update this game anymore. We're just going to give characters all sorts of crazy stuff and you guys figure it out over the game's lifespan. So there's games like Accent Core plus R. There is current code lies in that. For Street Fighter 4 people, there's Ultra Street Fighter 4, but there's also like Omega mode and there's like an addition select. So there's usually something they kind of like leave behind so players can explore the game for a long period of time. The people who are very dedicated to the game. It's a tough line to balance, especially since it might be pretty hard for people to admit, especially because there are literally very balanced versions of fighting games that, again, people are like, this version is boring. Fighting games are just inherently unbalanced because the characters are so different and so polarizing. They try to make the characters different on purpose. In games where the characters are similar, they usually have to do something to compensate. So for example, in Dragon Ball, a lot of characters were very similar. So the team build is what actually makes your characters feel different. If it was 1v1, a lot of characters will just feel like they're doing the same thing all the time. So since it's unbalanced, we have to kind of accept a degree of shenanigans. It's really hard. Again, a lot of games that are actually balanced, people are like, this is boring. So there's this feeling that the power level should be higher just so that even if it's like a silly game, like the one we're playing right now, Guilty Gear Strive, at least if you're having fun with your character, that is like probably one of the main goals. So overall, the answer to should we buff or should we nerf? The answer is honestly in between. So if there are tactics that are really strong and really centralizing, obviously we should nerf them. Buffs should be given to characters that are missing certain aspects or have really big disadvantages or maybe have something that was like overlooked. Outside of that, it's a tricky line to kind of toe. But I don't think you should just be like, you should just buff only exclusively. But let me know what you guys think though about this question. This one does kind of mean I think about it a decent amount, especially with all the character discourse that goes across various games like Street Fighter, like Guilty Gear, like Dragon Ball. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it. Again, YouTube really likes it if you watch another video, so go ahead and do that. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.